Okay, so picture this. A conflict that feels like it's a world away suddenly blows up right in your backyard. That is exactly what happened in the Indian Ocean, and it kicked off a massive diplomatic firestorm for India that had ripples across the globe. Let's break down how one sunken ship managed to create such enormous waves. So the very first official word we get comes straight from the United States, and wow, is it chilling. There's no room for guessing, no denial, just a blunt, straightforward confirmation. An Iranian frigate, a long way from home, was deliberately sunk. The fuse for an international crisis had just been lit.
Right, so how does something like this even happen? In supposedly neutral waters, really just a stone's throw from Sri Lanka. Let's dig into the hard facts of what went down. And this is the number that really grounds us in the reality of what happened. 87. That's how many bodies of Iranian sailors were recovered from the sea. It's a stark reminder that behind all the geopolitics and strategy, there was a terrible, terrible loss of life.
Okay, let's get the key facts straight. The date was March 4th. The target? The Iranian frigate IRIS Dena. The weapon of choice? A torpedo from a U.S. submarine. And the location? Yeah, it was international waters, but just look at where that is. We're talking about an attack happening right on India's doorstep.
Now this is where it gets kind of crazy. Just look at how fast everything spiraled out of control. On February 25th, it's all peaceful. A big naval exercise hosted by India just wrapped up. But then, just follow the timeline. 3 days later, Iran asks to dock a ship just as U.S. strikes on Iran begin. And then bam, only 3 days after that, the IRIS Dena is at the bottom of the ocean. The speed of this whole escalation is just staggering.
To really get why this was such a huge diplomatic mess, especially for India, we have to understand why this Iranian warship was even in the Indian Ocean to begin with. You see, this wasn't just some random patrol. So the Dena and its sister ships weren't just passing through. Not at all. They were actually honored guests of the Indian Navy. I mean, think about that. For weeks, they were participating in complex war games, sailing side by side with Indian ships, and probably posing for group photos with their hosts. They were, for all intents and purposes, allies in that moment. And this quote right here, it perfectly captures the heart of Iran's complaint. From their point of view, their ship, an invited guest of India, was attacked without any warning. And framing it that way, well, it puts India squarely in the middle of this whole dispute.
So what do? One of your guests has just been sunk and another one is in distress. India found itself walking this incredibly dangerous diplomatic and humanitarian tightrope, trying to balance its principles with some very harsh strategic realities.
And get this, as the Dena was sinking, a whole other drama was unfolding at the exact same time. Iran's other ship, the IRIS Lavan, suddenly reported engine trouble. So India, sticking to its humanitarian principles, said yes to its request for safe harbor. Which means on the very same day the Dena was destroyed, the Lavan and its 183 sailors were docking safely in an Indian port. The contrast is just wild.
And here you have the official justification. Notice the very careful language from India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. He's framing this as something completely separate from geopolitics. He's arguing it's just about a basic, humane duty to help a ship in distress. The wording there is very, very deliberate.
And at the same time, India absolutely did respond to the Dena's distress call. It sent out its own search and rescue planes and even deployed ships to help the effort that Sri Lanka was leading. Again, really leaning in to that humanitarian commitment.
But you know, these humanitarian gestures didn't stop the storm of criticism, not by a long shot. The whole incident immediately started raising some really uncomfortable questions about India's actual power and its self-proclaimed role in the region.
Almost right away, analysts started calling the whole thing a strategic embarrassment. For a country that really prides itself on being the main security provider, the guardian of the Indian Ocean, to have one of its own guests attacked and sunk in its backyard, well, that was seen as a major blow to its credibility.
And this is where India got caught in a classic diplomatic trap, a real catch-22. I mean, just think about it for a second. If India was genuinely surprised by the attack, then what does that say about its, quote, strategic partnership with the U.S.? Were they not sharing intelligence? But the other option is maybe even worse. If India knew about the attack and did nothing, then it completely shatters its whole policy of strategic autonomy. There were just no good options here. So the criticism came in fast and hard. People pointed to the really quiet, muted official response to the U.S. They said the sinking just exposed the limits of India's real power. Even small diplomatic things, like sending a bureaucrat instead of a high-level minister to sign a condolence book, were seen as a huge snub to Iran.
But India's top diplomat, he pushed back hard on this. Minister Jaishankar basically said, hey, let's be realistic here. He argued that powerful foreign navies have been operating in the Indian Ocean for decades. The U.S. base at Diego Garcia isn't new. He's suggesting that this reality is something they have to deal with, and it didn't just pop up last week.
And really, this brings us to the final big question that just hangs in the air. The sinking of the IRIS Dena wasn't just a military strike, it was a harsh test of power, of alliances, and of national identity. In an ocean that's no longer dominated by one single force but is getting more and more crowded with competing powers, what does it actually mean to be a guardian? That's the tough question this incident leaves for India, and really, for the rest of us too.